What exactly is P2?
Leaving behind scars that won't ever heal. I'm walking alone.
Freemason Lodge that was formed all the way back in 1877 for the who's who of society, created under the Grand Orient of Italy, aka their Grand Lodge. They started out as a philanthropic group as far as we're aware of. P2 in its original state actually lasted until being dismantled under Mussolini's rule. Once that came to an end, the Freemasons were allowed to assemble again, although there was a lot of scrutiny, so the head of the Grand Lodge, named Lino Salvini, would go on to ask a member named Licio Gelli to get P2 active and going again. In the early 1970s, P2 would become reinstated. Licio was born in Italy and would go off to war at just 17 years old, tragically losing his older brother in the process. This actually seemed to make him more determined than ever, and he chose to continue his military career fighting for Generalissimo Franco during the Spanish Civil War. Gelli would actually go on to do a lot of fascist work under Mussolini's rule, and even acted as a liaison between the Nazis and the Italian government. During his time doing this work, he would go on to make some pretty high-level connections that would serve him well in his professional ambitions later on. Once he left the military, he was inspired to open his own textiles and importing business, which catapulted him to the higher end of Italian society. But he never let go of his passion for fascism. He would eventually go on to join the Freemasons and revive P2 afterwards. Gelli is blamed for their descent into crime and corruption due to his obsession with fascism and his desire to combat the then ruling party. His actions actually caused the Freemasons to disown Italy's lodges for many years, before finally reconsidering them just several years ago. And before we get too deep into this topic, I want to quickly make note that not all members or associates of P2 were criminals or even aware of the shadow government crime ring vibes they had going on. It's actually said that many people even chose to leave P2 or not join once they discovered the true nature of the group. Getting back to P2, while they operated with very little issue for years, the first domino to fall for them would be the investigation predominantly revolving around a man named Michel Sedona, also known as the Shark. This banker was reportedly linked to the Sicilian Mafia and even had ties to the Vatican. Yeah, that Vatican. Sedona had quite the colorful history, serving as the personal financial manager and money launderer for the infamous Gambino family. Yeah, that Gambino family. And he even orchestrated hits on individuals like lawyer and loving father Giorgio Ambrosoli, who is thought to have known too much. Sindona ended up receiving a life sentence for Ambrosoli's murder and faced multiple charges for numerous other crimes in both New York and Italy. Strangely, just 2 days after his conviction, Sindona would pass away from poison in his morning coffee while in jail. People debate, still to this day, if he unalived himself or if someone did it to him to prevent him from talking, since he had really nothing else to lose. But what alerted police initially was when his bank collapsed due to obvious financial malpractice. This in turn helped investigators discover another P2 member, our friend Licio Gelli. Following the uncovering of crucial evidence, authorities would be able to raid his villa in Arezzo, Italy, along with his factory, where they would stumble upon the notorious P2 list containing the names of all active P2 members. So now that you've got some backstory, let's dig into P2 and Licio's biggest crimes and alleged involvements to work our way through this web of a case. At number 1, we have the Bologna Station Massacre. This devastating event took place on August 2nd, 1980 at 10:25 a.m. The people were busily running about their day when an abandoned suitcase would detonate suddenly, killing 85 people and injuring 200 others. While a separate fascist group called NAR was found to be liable for it, although more and more people have been brought up on charges over the years, Gelli and fellow P2 members were condemned for their attempt to mislead the police's investigations into the terroristic attack. Gelli would face a sentence of 5 years when they realized they didn't have enough evidence to tie him more deeply to the bombings, and they could really only go off of him tampering with the investigation. This event is still remembered as one of the biggest tragedies in Italian history, and I hope that their families may find peace. At number 2, we have Banco Ambrosiano. One of the most famous crimes associated with P2 is the collapse of this famous bank in 1982, and the $1.4 billion black hole found during investigations. The Vatican Bank, being one of the main shareholders of the collapsed bank, would also show to have a black hole totaling in $250 million. Gelli was found guilty of fraud and sentenced to 18 years for his role in this, but that would later be lessened to just 12 years after an appeal. After being sentenced, Gelli would simply vanish the day before he was meant to start his sentencing by going abroad to avoid jail for several years on and off. At number 3, we have Roberto Calvi. So this one is a bit messy and there is some conflicting information online, but basically Gelli was believed to have been responsible for putting a hit out on Calvi, aka God's Banker. He got his nickname due to his close work with the Vatican. Roberto was a fellow P2 member and prominent banker for the Vatican and Mafia during his lifetime. Calvi's body would be found all the way in London under a bridge. In 2005, Gelli was indicted by the Roman magistrates for the murder along with then Mafia boss Giuseppe Callo, as well as several other associates. Gelli claimed his innocence and insisted that the real killers were through Calvi working with the Polish Solidarity movement on behalf of the Vatican. Some people believe instead that Gelli and the Mafia were just punishing him over financial issues or to keep all the secrets and the crimes he was aware of from being exposed. Come 2005, Gelli's name would not be listed on the final indictments, and Gelli and the others were later acquitted due to insufficient evidence, which seems to be a recurring theme throughout many of these situations, which absolutely rub the public the wrong way, watching these people essentially get away with some really heinous crimes, allegedly. At number 4, we have Aldo Moro. Gelli was alleged to have encouraged this kidnapping turned murder by thwarting the ruling party's attempts to rescue Aldo. Aldo was a statesman and a member of the Christian democracy of Italy. He served as the prime minister for 5 terms, spanning on and off between 1968 and 1976. Essentially, on the morning of March 16, 1978, Aldo's car was taken over by members of the Red Brigade, which was a far-left terrorist group. They reportedly struck and killed Moro's bodyguards and several police officers that were nearby before kidnapping him. By the 8th of May, his body would tragically turn up discovered in a trunk. Thankfully, come 1983, 32 members of the group were sentenced to life in prison for their roles in the kidnapping and murdering of Aldo and the others. There's a lot that was never made clear to the public about this case, and there's believed to be a lot of other moving parts, which led to this story having many conspiracies surrounding it. As for its ties to P2, it's said that Gelli and his right-hand men were not only aware, but did things specifically to hinder the rescue of Aldo, which ended with his death. At number 5, we have Carmine Pecorelli, a well-known journalist who was killed in Rome in 1979, not long after Aldo Moro's tragic kidnapping and murder. Carmen was said to be on the list Gelli had of P2 members, meaning he was involved and likely had access to hidden knowledge. Carmen would declare Aldo's death was conducted by a quote-unquote lucid superpower, and he believed it to be inspired by the logic of Yalta, which was a meeting to reorganize the European countries after World War II, which was held by the US, Soviet Union, and the UK. Investigations into his death would point them towards the group NAR as well as Licio of P2, as well as several other members. A mob turncoat would later go on to say that Pecorelli was actually taken out due to what he was going to publish in the future about Aldo Moro's death. Giulio Andreotti, a prime minister of Italy, was actually tried twice along with several mob members, but would later all be acquitted for it, even though it seems that they likely had the correct people for the crime. Many people tie this case to P2 due to the membership status of Pecorelli, even though it seems that it was likely carried out by the mob. Licio is believed to be involved in many other crimes due to his apparent ties with the Mafia and the crimes carried out by lower-level members of P2. Considering that he presided over private meetings to discuss plans and actions to take. Theorists also believe much of the evidence was destroyed once investigations into Sindona began. This was especially popular after Licio's own daughter was caught transporting secret documents at an airport in a false bottom suitcase. Licio would flee and evade his time in jail for years, bouncing between Switzerland, Sweden, Argentina, and France, all before finally agreeing to go home after political changes had occurred, in hopes that he could get a quote-unquote fair shot, which, he most certainly did, considering that he was granted permission to serve his sentence on house arrest in his beautiful private villa until passing away in 2019. While some people believe Licio was a good man who loved his country and was just doing what needed to be done to make it strong and stable during really turbulent and unsteady times, most people believe he was a corrupt crime boss who abused his power as the leader of the lodge and manipulated, lied, and hurt many innocent people in his pursuits. So, what do you guys think about P2? Do you think this case proves there's more lurking behind the scenes than the public is really aware of? Make sure you let me know your theories down below. Now, as always, let's get into the cool facts that I've gathered while doing my research. At number 1. So, apparently the Vatican refused to allow the Archbishop, who is the head of the Vatican's bank, and doing dirty deeds down low, to be arrested for his crimes. So, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus was able to somehow escape punishment, like so many other members or people involved with P2, and the Vatican instead went on to pay $200 million to creditors from the bank's collapse. Somehow that doesn't seem fair. At number 2. Licio is said to have held secret meetings 3 days a week at the Excelsior Hotel, insisting that there be separate doorways so that there could be separate entrances and exits for members because there were such high-profile people coming and going at all hours. Privacy was key. This is where they would discuss their plans or request to Licio to enact on them. At number 3, Licio and P2 are said to not only have attempted and failed a coup d'etat, but also had an entire plan for overtaking the Italian government written down should it ever be needed for future use. Number 4. Gelli is rumored to have taken CIA money to help fight communism, which, we all know that's not shocking because the CIA really loves fighting communism in every single story you hear about them, so it's not that crazy. But what's funny is that Gelli was actually said to be playing the CIA and the KGB against each other by working with both of them and keeping most of the profits for himself. At number 5, even though the Vatican apparently put a ban on Masonic lodges, they still worked directly with them through banking and money matters, even having members split between both parties, like the Archbishop. And they still defend him to this day, so it's all alleged. Number 6, going off of this, is the fact that many people believe that P2 was directly involved with the death of Pope John Paul I. After investigating the Vatican's finances and finding that $250 million black hole we talked about, on September 28th of 1978, the Pope had announced his plan to remove the Archbishop Paul from his position, as well as several other members who were working directly with him. The very next day, the Pope would be found dead under mysterious circumstances, and no autopsy would be allowed to be performed. Yet, they somehow were able to rule it a heart attack? Who knows? This caused a lot of anger and conspiracies from the public, such as the belief in destruction of evidence, improper investigations, and this caused a huge mistrust with the people and the Vatican. What do you think happened? Number 7. P2 actually had many of its own subdivisions, most of them being abroad, meaning lodges existed in Venezuela, Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, and Argentina, meaning this group was much larger than many had previously believed. Number 8. The P2 list is thought to be just half of the actual count of numbers because the list had started off in the thousands, meaning there was likely 1,000 or so missing members that we still don't know about. It's worth noting that not everyone on the list is thought to be an active P2 member, as several were even able to prove to contentment of the courts that they had no involvement with P2's group. So some people believe that the list could be part list, part Rolodex for Licio, but neither is confirmed. And number 9. Many people believe P2 actually rebranded and operates under a different name in Italy after they were kicked out of the Freemasons during the trials. What do you guys think? Make sure you let me know down in the comments below what your take is. So, as we can see through the tangled web of secrecy, power, and corruption surrounding P2 and all of its many moving parts, it reveals another dark layer to our world's history. From the Vatican's financial dealings to the deadly reach of P2, each crime and fact that we discuss today goes to show the depths that humans will go to achieve power, status, or their version of what they think is right. So, thanks for joining me on Discovering P2, and as always, stay curious, stay weird, but not too weird. Bye!
People that were supposed to defend and protect the Constitution and the democratic institutions in Italy.